Hello and welcome to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efraín Martinez. I am a principal in search of wisdom, and I have found productivity to be a great tool for success. Today, I have the great and distinguished honor of interviewing Dr. Torrey Trust, who is an associate professor of learning technology in the Department of Education and Curriculum Studies in the College of Education at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. During her interview, we will discuss her own wisdom and productivity and the world of ChatGPT and education. Dr. Torrey Trust, who are you?
Good morning. Well, who am I? That's a big question. But as you mentioned, I'm an associate professor of learning technology. I'm a teacher, a writer, a researcher, and I look at how teaching and learning can be enriched and enhanced with technology, both for teacher learning and for student learning. So that's my main focus for research, teaching, and leadership. And on a personal side, I love travel and I love sports. So that's kind of a me in a nutshell.
Wondering where is the your favorite place where you have traveled?
It's between Iguazu Falls in Brazil and Argentina and Costa Rica are kind of, I would go back there in a heartbeat, either of those places.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. So, Tori, can you please walk us through your professional trajectory up to this point?
Yeah, so it started back in my undergraduate program. I went to UC San Diego and I was a visual arts and film major. And I thought I was going to be working in Hollywood someday as, a big movie producer. And I did an internship in Hollywood and thought, nope, this is not my career. It was my junior year. So I was like, well, it's too late to change my major at this point. What else am I good at? What else do I like to do? And at that time, I was a resident advisor. I was very involved on campus in a lot of different organizations. And so I ended up moving into student affairs at UC San Diego after I graduated and realizing how much I love to be in the field of education. But around the same time, UC San Diego experienced race riots and a lot of issues regarding equity, especially for Black students on campus. And I started researching that more and thinking, what can I do to help improve or support this issue? And realizing that K-12 schools was, the area to focus on so that students are better prepared by the time they get to college. So I left my job at UC San Diego, packed up, moved across the country with my husband to Washington, D.C. to work in one of the lowest performing elementary schools in the country. And it was quite an enlightening experience. And through that experience, I really recognized the power of technology combined with good teaching. And then I thought, okay, well, if I go, I was at the time I was getting my master's degree in educational technology at San Diego State and really seeing the potential benefits when combined with good teaching. And then I was sharing that with my colleagues. I was trying to help improve teaching and learning with technology. And my ideas and advice weren't really well taken up. I ended up, thinking, well, if I get a PhD, people will listen to me, which, spoiler alert, is not the case still. But I went to a PhD, I went to UC Santa Barbara to get my doctorate degree in education with a focus on teaching and learning and exploring teacher learning specifically with technology. And from there, I got my very first academic job at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, which I am still at today. So I've progressed from assistant professor to associate professor, and right now I'm on my trajectory to go up for promotion to full professor.
Oh, congratulations! The world academia is I have heard, right, that is publish or perish. What has been your experience in that realm?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say I first heard when I joined the University of Massachusetts Amherst and the new faculty orientation that 80% of your time should be spent on publishing and 20% on teaching and 20% on service, which anyone who does math knows that's well beyond 100%. And it kind of feels like that is that you're supposed to be publishing nonstop. But, I love teaching and I love putting time into teaching and finding that right balance between high quality teaching and high quality research and publishing, but also service to the field and the department and college and leadership. It's an amazing amount of time, and finding those boundaries and figuring out how you can be productive is absolutely essential in the field, because a lot of people can get lost in one way or another, focus too much on teaching and not enough on research, or too much on research but not enough on teaching and service. So it's important to get a lot of mentorship and support and figure out that pathway really early on, because by the time you go up for tenure, it's too late to make that change. That's what they're looking at.
Beautiful. Thank you for the great advice. So, like in Back to the Future, Torrey, if you could go back to any of the positions you have held in the past, what will the Torrey of today tell the Torrey of then?
Oh, I think I would tell my past self, you don't have to please everyone. I think that's, it's really in any job that I have been in, but especially in academia, especially when you're starting out, it's like you're the yes person. Sure, I'll serve on this committee. Sure, I'll do this. Yes, I'll help with this. Yes, I'll join this collaboration opportunity. And sometimes, actually, a lot of times that can really come at the detriment of your mental and physical health, is you end up spending so much time trying to do projects and extra service and all of these other things that you don't have enough time to do the things that really bring you joy outside of work. And so I really, and there's individuals who take advantage of that. And so that's a really tough thing to learn in that academic field, but I think in any career, is if you're always trying to be the people pleaser, there will be individuals who will make sure they take advantage of that. And, in the last couple of years, I've really learned to get better about setting those boundaries, really saying no, and trying to figure out, who I am and what my pathway is. And when I do say yes, making sure that that's aligned with my vision and goals for my career.
Great advice. Learn how to say no. Thank you so much, Torrey. So let's talk about books. If you will have to gift 2 books, one fiction, one nonfiction, to a loved one, what will those be?
Well, the Harry Potter book series is really what got me into reading, interestingly. As a kid, I did not like reading at all. And my parents, who were both teachers, were like, what can we do to get Torrey to read? And they tried everything. And at one point, my dad went to a librarian and she had suggested this new series called Harry Potter. And so my dad bought the book, wrote a little nice note in the cover, and then put it on my bookshelf. And I actually did not read it until 2 years later. I had met my really close friend and she was obsessed with the series. And I was like, well, I'll give it a try. And so, ever since then, I went to the opening premiere of all the movies, and even my husband and I, when we were honeymooning in all over Central and South America, the 7th book came out, and it came out first in English all over Central and South America. So we went and got the 7th book in El Salvador and read it by candlelight for 20 hours straight overnight. So that book to me was what really launched my interest and excitement in reading. And thank goodness it did, because in academia, you are reading nonstop all day, every day. In terms of nonfiction, one that has really shaped my life is Harvest for Hope by Jane Goodall. Jane Goodall's been a huge influence and role model in my life, in the way that power of helping others connect with the environment and taking care of the world that we live in. And that book in particular really got me interested in how do I think about food and nutrition and ways of taking care of myself, while also making sure I'm, taking care of the environment, the lands, the animals around me. And so a lot of my reading outside of work time is on nutrition and health, because I'm just fascinated by that subject.
Beautiful. Thank you. Reading is such a luxury. Torrey, who are your biggest influences?
So I'll start with my family, because I come from a whole family of educators. Both my parents, my dad was a high school science teacher for 30-something years. My mom was a science resource teacher for San Diego City schools for many years before she passed away. And my sister was an elementary teacher, and now she's a reading specialist in elementary schools. And my husband is an elementary technology teacher. And every single one of them is so creative, always engaged in learning and thinking about how can I teach better to improve the way I support my students, and have this really unique knack for connecting with students. And that's what I really feel education is about, is building those relationships, being innovative and constantly learning. So they've always influenced me throughout my life. In terms of professionally, my two colleagues, Dr. Jeffrey Carpenter at Elon University and Dr. Daniel Krutka at University of North Texas, I reached out to them on Twitter one day when I started my job, my very first week at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and I was completely lost in how do I get started with setting up a research agenda. And I basically messaged them on Twitter. We had never met before, and I was kind of like, will you be my academic besties? Like, will you do research with me? And they are so incredible in their thinking, in their writing, in their support of me in so many ways. We have published several articles that have, hundreds of citations. We've won several awards together. They were the reason I went up for tenure early, because we just really published so much and got our names out in the field. So they've been an absolutely huge influence in my life as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And how do you address this thing that we all have called imposter syndrome, when we feel that, I'm not good enough, or I cannot do that, that's only for others, not for me? How do you address this?
I think that's so common in the field of academia. And I see that in graduate students, but I also see that in faculty. And I've experienced this with ChatGPT. And all of a sudden, people are calling me an expert in this brand new artificial intelligence technology where I don't have a computer science background. And I really had to learn everything I could about artificial intelligence and computer science in like a week to be able to talk on it. And I think there's a couple ways I go about that. First is just establishing my boundaries in terms of what I can speak on. That really helps me. So when I talk on ChatGPT, I say, as a reminder, I'm not a computer scientist, but I am a person who has expertise in education technology and critical interrogation of education technology. So I can bring this lens to this topic, and that helps me feel confident in being able to talk without feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to speak on this, or I feel like a fake. And then, also thinking about the importance of taking risks. With imposter syndrome, it's like you get so scared you don't even try. And with my students, I'm constantly trying new ideas and things that either other people have never tried or that have only tried once. And I'm like, let me give it a go. And I fail often. And then I apologize to the students, and they see me as human. And then I say, let's figure this out together. And so, I think imposter syndrome, we often feel like we have to have all the expertise and not realize like it's okay to mess up, to apologize, to learn together, to take those risks and really set those boundaries of, where your expertise ends and where you should be talking and where you shouldn't be talking about a topic. And being okay with like, let's go look this up. Or I don't know. I think that's something academia people don't know how to say, is I don't know. And that's totally understandable. So those are kind of some of my tips for dealing with imposter syndrome.
Beautiful. And let's get into the ChatGPT questions. But before that, let's recognize the TeachBetter community.
This podcast is a proud member of the TeachBetter Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at www.teachbetterpodcastnetwork.com. Now let's get back to the episode.
So I remember when ChatGPT started coming through my horizons, everybody went straight to, students are going to plagiarize. This is bad. They're not going to be able to think, etc., etc. And then all of a sudden, these Google Slides that you put out there went like a storm everywhere. And I was fascinated because it was like the first time I was able to better understand what the heck was all this about. And I have a few questions that, of course, I implemented the support ChatGPT to create this question. So let's go at it. Torrey, for those that don't know, what is ChatGPT?
Well, ChatGPT is one of the most advanced artificial intelligence chatbots to date. It is a large language model, which basically means that it is using complex math and calculations and a huge data set that it's been trained on, more than 300 billion words scraped from the internet, to predict which words best go together to create a plausible sounding response to user inputted prompt or question. And the key there is it's predicting which words go together. And it's not Google, it's not Wikipedia, it's not out there to provide factual information. It's trying to guess what the best response is to a user-generated prompt, and actually is, taking the world by the storm for its ability to really mimic the way humans write and communicate. So it's pretty close, but on deeper analysis, you'll find some discrepancies.
Wow, how this came up to be like it is so like phenomenal the way you say it, but at some point someone must have gotten together with some people and say, let's come up with this. How was this created?
Oh goodness, I'm talking about imposter syndrome. I don't have the expertise that goes through the history of artificial intelligence and GPT, but I do know, this is something that scientists and researchers have been working on for decades. I mean, back in, I think, the 1950s or 60s, there was the ELIZA chatbot, so one of the very first chatbots that could respond to very simple requests. And, throughout history, there have been attempts to create something that mimics human intelligence. Again, artificial intelligence, the key word there is artificial. It's trying to get close to what humans can do. But it wasn't really until recently, with the massive computing power that we have and the access to big data, like being able to pull 300 billion words from the internet, that scientists and researchers have really been able to advance this field to the point that it seems close to mimicking human intelligence. And there's a whole history behind the GPT, which is generative pre-trained transformer, and how that came about. But that was really the big turning point in the most recent turning point in artificial intelligence, because of the way that it worked was so different from prior attempts throughout history.
Wow, that's fascinating. So what would you say how ChatGPT is transforming the traditional learning landscapes in schools and universities?
Well, I think it still remains to be seen whether it's going to be truly transformative. I think every so often a big technology or something comes out, like massive open online courses, even Wikipedia, the internet, smartphones come out, and there's this big panic of, do we really need schooling with these technologies, with this access to information? And here we are today, still, having formal schooling. And in many cases, a lot of teachers still teach without technology or with very limited technology in very old-fashioned ways, even though we live in this very technology-rich world. So I don't know how much influence ChatGPT will have, because it's still in its infancy. It just came out in November 2022. But it is one of the first tools that I have seen many educators stop and question their role as the educator. Some asking, is my job now obsolete? And, maybe it is obsolete if your sole job is disseminating information that students, summarize and report back to you. But there really is so much more to education than just providing students factual information. And there's this human component, creative component, designing diversified and individualized learning experiences. So I think there's great benefit in just the tool getting educators to think differently about their practice. And often when I see how educators are thinking differently, it's going back to evidence-based best practices like student-centered learning, providing multiple means of engagement, which is one of the universal design for learning principles, higher order thinking skills, things that ChatGPT can't do. So that makes me really hopeful to see how educators are starting to shift their practice towards, okay, well, if an AI tool can respond to this prompt of compare and contrast Romeo and Juliet and The Great Gatsby, why do my students need to do that? And so then you can think about, well, maybe it can respond to that prompt, but what can students do next? You know, can they apply their knowledge? Can they write their own remix of the two books together to present the themes that they found throughout? Can they design a podcast series or a video about their findings, things that ChatGPT can't do yet? Is this application of knowledge or creation of new media and products? So that has left me very hopeful. But to be honest, the biggest changes I've seen is kind of like a change in the syllabus policy around academic integrity. So I think it's we're taking baby steps right now, is how do we make these small changes and have conversations with students about these tools? And I'm hopeful that the changes will continue to, shift the way teaching and learning happens, but that still remains to be seen.
I see. Torrey, what are some of the most innovative things you have seen with either schools or higher ed institutions of the use of ChatGPT?
So in the Cult of Pedagogy blog, which I love to follow for my own professional learning, they talk about ChatGPT as an example machine. And often, teachers spend a lot of time trying to come up with examples to help make learning concrete and help students really understand something. And the blog that I read was just a really innovative way of quickly generating different examples that help students, analyze or critique or think differently about a topic. And then also Dr. Brian Alexander in his blog wrote about the use of ChatGPT for role-playing scenarios and simulations. And that's something that I think we could definitely bring more into education, is thinking about, let's not just explore the American Revolution by memorizing, who the key players were and what the impacts were, but let's role play. What might have happened if this scenario changed, or if this, was different in history, and having kind of, conversations. And then the third example that really interested me was Tate and colleagues, who wrote an article about ChatGPT, talked about it as a teachable agent. And so we often think about ChatGPT as, just disseminating information. You go and ask it to summarize or explain, but it is a chatbot. So, having students have to teach ChatGPT, string theory, for example, or I tried to teach it about my research on professional learning networks, and I had to really think about what prompts I would give it and how I would provide different information. And then it responded back. So I would say, here's what a professional learning network is. And then it's like, yeah, here's what I understand of it. And it would ask me a question to follow up. And then me and the artificial intelligence, I'm not going to humanize this technology, would go back and forth. And it was, it really helped clarify my thinking around the concept. And, anytime we teach, we have to deepen our thinking to be able to share with others. So those are kind of three really innovative uses that I've heard about so far with ChatGPT in education.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. The question of probably most of my teacher friends is this. So thinking about plagiarism, what are the ethical considerations to be considered when implementing chatbots in education, and how can we ensure that they are used ethically and responsibly?
Oh, that's a big question. And I think, it's not just students who are turning to ChatGPT to plagiarize or use it for ghostwriting. I think, as I mentioned, with it being one of the most advanced chatbots to date that can mimic human writing, people in every career who use writing in some way or another, whether it's grant writing or marketing materials, social media posts, are trying to figure out what it means to use this tool ethically and legally. And we end up with some unethical examples like Coco, the emotional support chat service that you would type in questions around emotional or mental health, and humans would respond. They swapped out humans for ChatGPT, but didn't tell users. And then they did after the fact, and users, of course, felt deceived and tricked. And then big media outlets like CNET, which published more than 70 articles generated by AI without telling readers that they were generated by AI. And now we have politicians who are writing bills about AI, but asking ChatGPT to write the bills for them. So I think we have to have these conversations with students at every grade level, especially in higher education before they get into their careers, around what does it mean to write, and what counts as plagiarism and what doesn't in the era of AI writing tools like ChatGPT. And having democratic conversations is, I think, the best route to go. Like, bring students' voices in, because I've seen articles where students examine ChatGPT and say, well, hey, this is plagiarizing, or this isn't right, or I wouldn't feel happy if my peers use this and I didn't have access to it. So I think having some conversations with students around these critical questions around what counts as plagiarism and what doesn't, and when can and should you use the tool. Like in my classes, like, I encourage students to use the tool if it will help clarify their thinking, improve their communication skills, support with creative thinking. But if they are going to copy anything word for word directly from ChatGPT, and currently in my syllabus, it says to cite it, but I think I'm going to rethink that, because ChatGPT is not, it's not a source. It's pulling words together from a whole bunch of sources. So I still have to have that conversation with students around, should they cite ChatGPT or go and try and find the original sources to cite? So I think we're at this moment in time where you can kind of go one way or another. You can say, let's ban the tool, let's use plagiarism detectors, and that creates all sorts of obstacles, especially for students with disabilities and language and learning and communication struggles, traditionally marginalized students, which will create more surveillance and monitoring. Or we can, go the more student-centered democratic route of having conversations and building academic integrity policies into classes and syllabi around what it means, so that when they do get into careers, hopefully they don't end up like Coco or CNET, just, having ChatGPT do the work of humans without letting others know. So that's my hope, is just to encourage educators and students to really have some critical conversations around this topic.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And if life was a movie and you could fast forward to the future, what do you think chatbots and ChatGPT are gonna be? How are they gonna be evolving throughout the years? I know these are guessing, but what is your best guess?
I mean, I can barely think like the next year what ChatGPT will do. I know that GPT-4 is supposed to be released relatively soon. So we're on GPT-3, which is ChatGPT. And GPT-4 is, exponentially more advanced in terms of the parameters that it's built on. And I'm already thinking like ChatGPT is close to mimicking human writing. What will GPT-4 come out? And that's within the next year. So how do we think about the future where it will, these types of artificial intelligence tools will continue to be programmed to be more intelligent and more human-like? And my best hope is a world where humans and AI interact in ways that improve human life, human productivity, human thinking and communication. And I'm already seeing that. I saw a recent research article of, professionals in different fields who have turned to ChatGPT to support their writing, and it actually improved productivity, especially for individuals who struggled with language and communication and writing, and really decreased that gap in productivity in workers already in these fields. So I can imagine in the future where, it'd be great to see kind of a decrease in gaps between, whether it's the digital divide or knowledge gaps, where AI could really come in and help reduce like equities. Of course, currently AI is known for exacerbating inequities, which is a whole nother issue. But I try to remain on the cautiously optimistic side that maybe humans are turning to AI to boost their productivity, their creativity, the way that they think and interact and learn.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I feel illuminated with my questions at ChatGPT. Let's talk about the productivity of your wisdom. As you know, being successful in any field, people need to be on top of their productivity. But this looks so different for everyone. What does it mean to you to get organized to ensure that you still can do like traveling and all this fun stuff that you do?
Oh, time management is something I learned, very early on. And in college, I was working like 3 different jobs. I was on the track and field team, which was about 20 hours a week of practice and competitions. And then I was doing a full-time class load. And my resident advisor job alone was another 20 hours a week of work. And I had to learn very quickly to keep on top of all of that and maintain my high GPA to figure out time management. And so back then I had 3 calendars. I had my iMac calendar, my Apple calendar, that is where I put all my events. So resident advisor events, all my work events, anything, because that little reminders pop up on your computer. And then I get the student planner every semester. And I would, as soon as I got all my syllabus for all my classes, I'd go through and I'd map out the entire semester for every single class of what was due when, starting with the end and working all the way back. And then for daily, I had a little whiteboard. And so each week I would write out on the whiteboard my 7 days of the week and what I had to do every single day between those 2 calendars, between homework and events and everything else going on. And it was like such joy to mark things off my whiteboard. It's just go and be like, yep, done, did that one. And that was what I had to do to keep on top of everything. And it has continued today. I have 2 calendars. I have my iCal calendar where I keep most of my life organized, but I have a work calendar for a lot of, webinars and Zoom meetings, and all of those things are on my Google calendar. And then I use things like Google Keep to kind of my digital age to-do list where I can check things off. And then like new tools like the snooze feature in Gmail, which I just discovered maybe a couple months ago, has been a lifesaver because I get overwhelmed with too many emails. And sometimes I'll just move those emails to events on calendars, and that's a whole extra step. And once I discovered the snooze feature, where it's like, okay, I don't have time to get to writing this project for another month. I will just snooze this till then. So I have a whole bunch of email snooze that come up here and there, but it really clears my mind. So between the 2 calendars and the different tools that I use, so that when I do try to fall asleep at night, I'm not racing through what are the things I forgot to do or I need to do this week. And so having these different tools has been really essential for, clarity of thinking. And my favorite tip, because a lot of graduate students ask me, like, how are you so productive? Is that when I do map out my calendar, so I have a good sense of how long it'll take me to write something. And so I might put like 3 hours on Wednesday morning to write chapters, 1 and 2 of a book that I'm focusing on. If I finish that faster than the 3 hours, then it's free time. Like I don't then throw in a whole bunch of extra, like, okay, well, now I can get to email. Now I can do this. No, it's like, now I can get out and go for a walk or like have a little treat or, get out and about. And that motivates me to be more efficient and productive and not just say, okay, I have 3 hours. I'll just check some email for a bit. I'll do this for a bit and kind of drag it on. It's like, no, I sit down and I get through what I can. Sometimes it takes all 3 hours, which is a bit disappointing. But if I do finish early, I count that as a treat, and that helps me stay on top of things.
And when you write, do you enclose yourself in a place? You put music, you put candles. Like, what does that work behind the scenes looks like?
Well, I write at home, which is to me the easiest place to write because it's quiet and there's no interruptions. I take my phone and put it on silence and flip it upside down so I don't get distracted. I make sure not to check my email. Although, to be fair, in those little treats, I don't know why I consider email a treat, but it's a mental break. So I might write for 45 minutes. And if I get stuck, just pop open email and be like, I can respond to a couple of these. But yeah, and I have like a 30-inch monitor. So I have, the ability to put 2 documents side by side, and that is absolutely essential. I try to write on my laptop, and it takes me like twice as long because you're flipping between, especially with like research and literature reviews, you might have like 30 tabs of articles open, and then like you're writing, or often I'll have the same document open on 2 different tabs, and I'm trying to go back and forth of like, what did I say earlier in this journal article? Or I need to add in a reference, and rather than losing my place here. So it all takes place, at home, working on writing. I do writing, a lot. That's a huge part of my job, whether it's research articles or, blog posts or news articles, trying to get my work out there. And that's it. No music, no other distractions. I have noise canceling headphones, my AirPods, and those little breaks that I mentioned that I built in are essential. And I have my super adorable Chihuahua who is behind me in this virtual background. And she's sometimes the break that I need is like, okay, I need to take her outside. So let me get up from this chair, move around, go stand in the sunlight for a bit, and then bring her back inside. Okay, I'm ready to sit down and start writing again.
Beautiful. Let me ask you. I'm sure with all these years of experience, what lessons have you learned in terms of dissertation writing? For me, it was like the most monumental thing I did. And then when years pass, you're like, nah, that wasn't really that bad. What advice do you give to your students who are working on their dissertations?
Oh, goodness. In terms of writing, yeah. I mean, it's a lot of what I've been talking about in terms of mapping out what they need to write and when. And so I try to set deadlines when I meet with my doctoral students of, okay, in the next month, we're going to meet, 1 month from now, I would like you to have this chapter ready and sent to me in 3 weeks. And then I try to talk to them about, okay, you really need to map this out on your calendar, what it means to write this 50-page chapter. That means you're writing, like 10 to 15 pages a week or more. And then to prepare for that, you need to do some like literature review. So maybe start with a couple of days of that. So I try to help them map it out. But, every doctoral student, myself included, struggles with figuring out how to make sure that they're productive on something like a dissertation, which can be 300 plus pages, especially in the field of education, can be really daunting. And just thinking of that task, and then the data analysis, I think, is where a lot of people get stuck, is they collect so much data, they don't know where to begin. And I often am like, well, think about, the structure. And so you've got your literature review, you've got your methods, you have your 3 research questions, organize each research question into a chapter, or use those research questions to guide you. So if you have that initial organization and structure built into the writing, and then you just break it down into pieces. All right, let's start with research question 1. Let's look at the data focused on that. Now let's pare that down so we can write a couple pages in the start, and then we'll like expand on that. So I think it really is kind of narrowing things down and chunking, and not getting overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, I have to write 300 pages, but more just let's dive in and focus and pull apart this data here and think about how to write about that, and then just take it one step at a time.
I see. Do you use any software to organize your bibliography?
Yes, I feel like I should, and being an edtech specialist, and I have looked at Zotero and Mendeley and RefWorks, different tools, and I don't. It's probably someday I will, but I do the very much, I write not for a dissertation, but when I'm writing journal articles, which can be up to like 60 pages, is I'll write, and then I'll either put the citation in as I'm writing, or I literally just in like parentheses write all caps citation. And then so that's where I help myself from not getting stuck, is I get stuck on citation and references, and then copy editing, like going back through and just editing. I could do that for hours. And so I just tell myself, okay, I have to sit down and I have to write this method section. I'm not going to get stuck searching for citations or focusing on specifics in grammar, and then I'll come back and do that at a later point. And that's kind of my method of just, making sure that I get writing done. And then it's not super great towards the end of the paper when I go to submit and have to go find all like 100 references. And But when you start writing on the same topic, the cool thing is I can find my old articles and copy and paste a lot of references, and I'm still finding new ones, but that's kind of a low stakes thinking task. So sometimes toward the end, it's just like nice that's a good time to put on music and just go do the APA style citation for the, 50 to 100 that I need to add. But I'm sure there's a much better, more productive strategy with using those tools, or even like Google Docs has Citation Manager built in. I just don't trust them as well to do it correct with APA formatting as they should. I've seen Google Scholar citations. So that's kind of my concern with those tools.
Do you write using Google Docs, or do you have a different software?
Yeah, Google Docs, and especially because I do a lot of collaborative projects. So Dr. Carpenter and Dr. Krutka, who are different states, and we've written for years. We'd often just pull up, at the time, I think it was Google Meet, and we'd be talking, but we'd all be on the same document. And since then, I've collaborated with colleagues near and far, and we're always using Google Docs because we can all be on at the same time. We can comment on one another's. I love the suggested edits feature where we're going in and revising, remixing. So I have written on Google Docs ever since then. It's really helped with collaboration.
Beautiful. And finally, any other interests you might have when you are not Professor Truss and you're not into this work?
Oh, so, as I mentioned at the start, sports and traveling are my key interests. I love watching sports and I love playing sports. I am going to go watch the Premier League soccer games this morning after this is over. And I grew up playing all sorts of sports, and even in college, I was on the track and field team. In graduate school, I would do like 7 intramural sports every week, one every night that was a different sport. And at University of Massachusetts Amherst, faculty are allowed to do intramurals with the students. So it's been a really fun to do flag football and 2-ball soccer and kickball and everything with the students and get out and about in the community. That's one of the best ways to build relationships and meet people, especially when you move somewhere. But, I don't mind watching sports, even though, unfortunately, I'm a San Diego fan and Chargers and Padres are just not good. But I still that's in my heart. I have to watch and cheer for them. And then travel to me is just, experiencing new places, new cultures, new foods. I've been to all 7 continents. I absolutely love to explore the world because we have this is our one life to really get out and explore. And we have such an incredible world environmentally and with all the people in it. So those are really my 2 passions outside of work.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation. I have learned quite a lot. Any last thoughts for the listeners and viewers of the show?
I think, the most important thing in careers and productivity is finding people who can support you, who mentor you throughout whatever career or even just in life. And I've been so fortunate. There's, I call, some of my colleagues and friends, my adopted colleagues, they're not in my field, but they have brought me into, virtual lunches or get-togethers. And some of my friends, who have helped me introduce me to new friends to make even more friends. So if you can find people who, are there for you no matter what, who can support you, who can be a sounding board, who can tell you when to say no and actually listen to them. That's, one of the most important things I think anyone should think about in terms of careers and productivity.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Torrey. Enjoy your Premier League and have a wonderful Saturday.
Will do. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Wisdom and Productivity, the podcast of Dr. Efraín Martinez.
Chulo.
And I love that production. Chulo out.